This evening, esteemed audience, we journey into the blood-drenched streets of ancient Castile. The long arm of the Inquisition still reaches across time. The shadows cast by Gothic cathedrals conceal far more than just darkness. What caused the ancient Iberian kingdoms to spawn an abundance of stories about otherworldly retribution? The sacred war of the Reconquista inflicted spiritual scars that never fully mend. Travelers along the Camino de Santiago recount experiences that defy both logic and belief. Yet one particular divergence would resonate throughout Spanish paranormal lore for ages. Refusing to succumb to death, Don Rodrigo employed Kabbalistic rituals to anchor his family's spirits. He tethered them to the Mendoza house, forming a haven for their souls. The ceremony demanded the loss of their earthly existence, yet safeguarded their fundamental selves. The metamorphosis unfolded with eerie exactness. Upon arriving on November 16th, the Inquisition authorities discovered the mansion completely vacant. The house was overflowing with signs of Jewish rituals. Hebrew hymns resounded in every chamber. Sabbath flames flickered without any wax or wicks. A sukkah structure materialized in the courtyard, adorned with fruits that displayed no rot. Despite the winter season, the fruit stayed perfectly fresh. Physician Abraham Zacuto recorded the Mendoza metamorphosis in his personal journal. His writings detailed supernatural occurrences that defied both Jewish and Christian conceptions of what comes after death. This family attained Gilgul reincarnation without dying, he noted. They dwell between realms, preserving their Jewish heritage while occupying a Christian domain. The dwelling turned into a refuge beyond the reach of inquisitorial power. Other conversos found themselves dreaming of the mansion, drawn there during moments of spiritual turmoil. This haven exacted a price. Guests aged at an accelerated rate, as though time operated differently. A few left bearing recollections of talks with departed relatives. Others acquired insights into Jewish mysticism from long-dead teachers. The church commissioned a probe involving exorcists, theologians, and academic minds. Their verdict deemed the phenomenon genuine spiritual defiance, not demonic infestation. These are genuine souls who opted for spiritual demise over abandoning their faith, penned Father Luis de Granada. The church now confronted a dilemma: how to address the endurance of Jewish identity. Despite attempts at conversion, that identity refused to vanish. The political consequences reached far past Toledo. If Jewish souls managed to endure after conversion, then the entire campaign for religious uniformity, through oppression, was fundamentally flawed. Conversos experienced spiritual revivals that rekindled their bond with Jewish heritage. Certain individuals renounced their Christian existence. Others covertly observed Judaism under Mendoza's direction. In Holy Week of 1493, the mansion displayed visions portraying the crucifixion as a tragedy for the Jewish people. Christ's execution was depicted as a political act by Rome, not a holy sacrifice. Such a portrayal struck at the very core of Spanish Catholic identity. The building was officially designated as a museum celebrating Christian triumph, yet in secret, it functioned as a refuge. Contemporary academics confirm the otherworldly character of the change. During her 1995 doctoral study, Dr. Elena Romero recorded anomalies in the atmosphere. She stated, "In vacant chambers, I listened to Hebrew supplications and discovered texts materializing from one day to the next. My sleeping visions supplied precise details regarding Converso heritage." Casa Mendoza continues to be acknowledged as both a historical landmark and a holy haven. The Spanish authorities have extended an offer for the offspring of banished Jews to regain their nationality. Nevertheless, this dwelling serves as a reminder that certain religious injuries surpass political healing. According to local belief, the spirits of the Mendoza family manifest themselves to those who approach with reverence. These apparitions counsel matters of faith, absorption into society, and inner truth. Irrespective of being actual occurrences or shared remorse, the edifice represents the endurance of Jewishness within Spain. The structure bears witness to a belief that overcomes oppression and mortality. The initial omens were auditory, chants in Latin reverberating along the hallways, taking place in the hours from midnight until sunrise. They would intone the Dies Irae, the hymn sung during executions, yet with alterations that none alive could have been aware of. The spectral utterances proclaimed, "Judex ergo sederit," quid laudet apparabit, interpreted as, when the arbiter assumes his seat, everything concealed shall be made manifest. However, the voices appended passages that were absent from any canonical text predictions concerning the condemnation of magistrates and the everlasting destiny of those possessing ecclesiastical power. No leniency was shown. The paranormal occurrences intensified with the exactness of celestial punishment. Papers that had been individually secured by Father Martinez Sanchez materialized on his work table by morning. They lay open to admissions that exposed the blamelessness of certain persons, those individuals he had sentenced to die. The archival files of the auto de fe started to transform, with fresh evidence emerging in the side notes. They depicted the otherworldly justification of martyrs who perished while asserting their lack of guilt. The most unsettling element was the phantom figures. Starting from January of 1834, the priest Martinez Sanchez started meeting persons he identified as previous inmates of the Inquisition court. These entities materialized in his private quarters, inside the church while Mass was celebrated, and along the thoroughfares of Córdoba. They invariably retained the corporeal state they exhibited during their own demise, displaying evidence of torment, the scorch of the pyre, the ligature impressions of the strangling device. The thinker Miguel de Unamuno, who was a philosopher, investigated these occurrences in Córdoba. This inquiry formed a segment of his exploration into the collective remorse of Spanish Catholicism. He recorded several such meetings. Such meetings defy ordinary comprehension regarding existence beyond death and heavenly retribution. His private writings, kept within the University of Salamanca's repositories, delineated metaphysical events. According to Unamuno, the victims of the Inquisition were said to have attained a kind of otherworldly justification. The condemned ones have come back not to exact vengeance, but to be acknowledged, he penned. What they desire is recognition of their blamelessness and a confession of the wrongs inflicted upon them under the guise of religious conformity. A supernatural accounting now centers on Father Martinez Sanchez, spanning 300 years of inquisitorial oppression. The beings that manifested before Father Martinez Sanchez revealed information that confirmed their genuine link to past occurrences. They furnished specifics regarding their hearings which aligned with confidential documents and recounted methods of torment that had been employed on them. Furthermore, they disclosed facts concerning fellow captives that no mortal could have been aware of. Most strikingly, they exhibited the persistence of the very spiritual rites that led to their condemnation. They executed Jewish ceremonies, Muslim supplications, and Protestant worship with an uncanny accuracy. This otherworldly exoneration of those persecuted by the Inquisition compelled Father Martinez Sanchez to face the prospect that his entire career had constituted not holy ministry but methodical oppression of genuine belief. Rather than casting blame, the presences that came to him extended sympathy. They urged him to admit the reality of the Inquisition's atrocities and to unite with them. This would mean forging a spiritual fellowship that went beyond the confessional lines which had separated them during their earthly existence. Yet the proposition carried stipulations that undermined every tenet Father Martinez Sanchez held regarding the power of the Church and its clerical order. To embrace the paranormal absolution of the Inquisition sufferers would demand recognition that the Church's assertion of sole spiritual dominion was erroneous, that genuine devotion could flourish beyond Catholic teachings, and that the Inquisition's oppression was not a sacred mission, but rather an organized transgression of heavenly precepts. This turmoil peaked as Father Martinez Sanchez celebrated his last Eucharist within the Cathedral of Córdoba on the 15th of February, 1834. When he raised the Eucharist during the consecration, the holy substances started to change. In manners that defied the Catholic interpretation of transubstantiation, the wafer and wine now bore visible emblems signifying every spiritual path, which the Inquisition had suppressed. Jewish unleavened bread, Islamic halal insignia, Protestant Reformation motifs, and native Iberian mystical marks. This miraculous alteration of the Eucharist sparked a doctrinal upheaval that reached well past personal transformation. Should the flesh and blood of Christ prove the legitimacy of other faiths, then the whole framework of Catholic uniqueness would be thrown into doubt. The liturgy meant to embody the oneness of Catholic belief actually exposed the multiplicity. of true spiritual encounters that the Inquisition had endeavored to quash. How Father Martinez Sanchez reacted to this paranormal test would shape his religious heritage and affect the Spanish Catholic perspective on religious acceptance for centuries to come. Instead of dismissing what his senses told him, or labeling the events as demonic trickery, he decided to accept that divine justice followed rules beyond the control of church authorities. On the evening of the 20th of February, 1834, Father Martinez Sanchez conducted a ceremony blending Catholic confession with elements from every faith the Inquisition had once suppressed. He openly declared the victims blameless, admitted the atrocities carried out under the guise of religious purity, and sought absolution from the spiritual leaders of the destroyed communities. The supernatural reaction to his confession came with eerie precision. The ghostly voices that had tormented the tribunal building began to sing in a fusion of Latin hymns, Hebrew psalms, Islamic dhikr, and Protestant chorales. The very structure appeared to release centuries of pent-up spiritual energy, as though the stones themselves were finally letting go of the agony they had soaked up during the Inquisition's reign. Yet, Father Martinez Sanchez's change came at a price that defied ordinary ideas of spiritual redemption. His admission of the Inquisition's sins led to his expulsion from the Catholic Church, but it also opened doors to a wider spiritual fellowship that included representatives of all the persecuted religions. The ex-inquisitor turned into a link between the Catholic Church and the faiths it had harmed, but he also stood as a living proof that religious harmony could never be achieved through oppression. His supernatural endorsement of the Inquisition's victims set a standard for spiritual healing that demanded not only recognizing past wrongs, but also actively rebuilding the religious variety that had been wiped out. According to Cordoban folklore, Father Martinez Sanchez still appears to those who visit the old tribunal building, with a sincere desire to grasp the spiritual toll of religious bigotry. He provides counsel to people wrestling with questions of religious legitimacy, spiritual truth, and the tension between institutional duty and personal moral compass. The Catholic Church's formal reaction to the events in Cordoba highlighted the broader dilemma that supernatural validation of Inquisition victims created for church authority. The Vatican attributed Father Martinez Sanchez's encounters to psychological strain rather than authentic supernatural occurrences. Yet it also launched internal changes to tackle the historical wrongs that had paved the way for such phenomena. Contemporary researchers studying the Cordoba archives describe experiences that confirm the supernatural nature of Father Martinez Sanchez's transformation. Dr. Carmen Garcia Arenal, while examining the tribunal records for her study of Inquisition psychology, logged atmospheric disruptions during her sessions, temperature shifts, magnetic anomalies, and auditory signals, hinting at entities still tied to the historical events. I caught whispers of prayers spoken in tongues representing every religious tradition the Inquisition had crushed, she recounted. I turned up documents that had seemingly materialized overnight, composed in scripts mixing Latin with Hebrew, Arabic, and indigenous Iberian signs. More strikingly, during my research I had dreams that supplied details about tribunal operations that later turned out to be accurate when cross-checked against sealed files. Today, the former tribunal building functions as a museum of tolerance, officially aimed at teaching visitors about the perils of religious persecution, while secretly continuing its role as a hub for interfaith dialogue. The Spanish government has recognized the Inquisition's wrongs and launched initiatives to honor the victims, yet the building still stands as a reminder that some spiritual wounds cannot be healed by political measures alone. Modern Catholic theologians examining the Cordoba phenomena contend that Father Martinez Sanchez's experience offers a blueprint for how religious bodies can confront historical sins without forsaking their core spiritual mission. His supernatural reversal of the Inquisition's judgments created a paradigm for religious authority that prioritizes service over dominance, inclusivity over exclusivity, and the acknowledgement of divine truth that goes beyond any single church tradition. The supernatural occurrences that transformed Father Martinez Sanchez could represent either genuine divine intervention or a psychological manifestation of guilt over the Inquisition's atrocities. Regardless, they stand as powerful emblems of the chance for redemption, even for those complicit in systematic persecution. This narrative serves as a reminder that authentic spirituality demands more than institutional authority. It requires personal accountability for how religious power has been used to inflict harm instead of offering healing. Within the winding alleys of Cordoba's Old Quarter, where the Mezquita Mosque commemorates the religious pluralism that once prospered in Al-Andalus, the former tribunal building preserves the memory of all that was lost when tolerance gave way to fanaticism. This further illustrates that certain types of spiritual authority cause more wounds than they mend, and that genuine religious faith requires the courage to admit when institutional power has been exploited for human ambition rather than divine will. Spain's perception of religious authority and spiritual responsibility continues to be influenced by the last inquisitor's curse. His miraculous transformation acts as a link connecting Spain's legacy of religious persecution with its modern attempts to build a society where diverse spiritual traditions can coexist without fear of official oppression. Third tale: the Phantom Pilgrims of Santiago, the souls that could never reach the saint. During the summer of 1937, as the Spanish Civil War fragmented the nation and revolutionary fervor threatened to destroy ancient customs, the most sacred pilgrimage route in Catholic Europe started displaying paranormal phenomena that challenged everything believers knew about faith, redemption, and the connection between earthly pain and divine mercy. The Camino de Santiago, which for over a millennium had guided millions of pilgrims to the shrine of St. James, became haunted by spirits who died while seeking salvation, but found only eternal wandering in a spiritual limbo that modern theology could not explain. Imagine the ancient path that twists through the mountains of northern Spain, where medieval pilgrims once walked hoping to earn forgiveness for their sins through devotion to Santiago Matamoros, St. James the Moor Slayer. This route, which once symbolized Christianity's triumph over Islamic conquest, became a corridor for entities that challenged the Catholic Church's understanding of pilgrimage, redemption, and the effectiveness of good works for salvation. The first reports of supernatural activity came from Republican militiamen who were using the pilgrimage route to transport supplies between Galicia and the Basque provinces. Soldiers raised in Catholic families but who had adopted revolutionary atheism began encountering figures dressed in medieval clothing, seemingly walking the Camino despite the ongoing war that had made the route impassable for civilian pilgrims. Captain Eduardo Alvarez, commanding a Republican unit stationed near Astorga, documented experiences that contradicted his materialist worldview and forced him to acknowledge that some aspects of Spanish Catholic tradition might hold realities beyond political ideology. His confidential reports, preserved in the archives of the Spanish Civil War Historical Memory Foundation, described phenomena suggesting that the Camino itself had become a supernatural entity that continued to serve pilgrims regardless of earthly circumstances. "We observe them moving at dawn and dusk," Alvarez wrote. Shrouded figures in medieval garments, carrying staffs topped with scallop shells, speaking in tongues that resemble Latin yet contain words no living person can comprehend. They follow the traditional pilgrimage path, but show no recognition of the war, the blockades, or the dangers surrounding them. The Phantom Pilgrims exhibited traits that confirmed their supernatural origin, while undermining conventional beliefs about life after death. They cast no shadows, even when walking under bright sunlight. They left no footprints, even when treading through mud and snow. Most unsettling, they seemed to exist in a temporal dimension that allowed them to interact with the medieval landscape while remaining invisible to most contemporary observers. As part of his investigation into Spanish epic tradition, philologist Dr. Ramon Menendez Pidal examined the Camino phenomena and gathered linguistic proof indicating that the ghostly pilgrims were genuine historical individuals, not mere folkloric constructs. By analyzing their speech patterns captured in recordings obtained by Republican troops, he uncovered dialects matching particular eras and local variations that had vanished hundreds of years prior. These beings communicate in medieval Spanish, Latin, French, and German, using versions that align perfectly with records from the 12th to 15th centuries, Menendez Pidal noted. Their vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar could only be acquired through first-hand exposure to those historical eras. Even more strikingly, they display awareness of medieval pilgrimage traditions, religious rituals, and geographic landmarks that have since been altered or erased by later events. These otherworldly wayfarers appeared confined to a spiritual condition that kept them from finishing their trek to Santiago de Compostela. Manifesting at different spots on the trail, they always headed west toward the saint's sanctuary, yet never appeared to get any closer to their goal. Witnesses among the local populace claimed identical phantoms materialized at identical places annually, as though perpetually reliving one segment of their journey, never progressing toward spiritual fulfillment. Despite the Civil War's anti-clerical brutality, Sarria's parish priest, Father Marcelo Gonzalez, had upheld pilgrimage customs and discerned the theological weight of these ghostly wanderers. Having studied medieval theology, he recognized that their endless roaming constituted a kind of divine retribution that called into question Catholic teachings on pilgrimage's role in salvation. These individuals tried to earn forgiveness by performing good deeds, instead of relying on divine grace, Father Gonzalez wrote in his personal diary. Convinced that the walk to Santiago would secure their salvation, they perished before reaching the end of the road. Now they remain stuck in a liminal existence between life and death, unable to arrive because they tried to merit something that must be freely given. As the Civil War escalated, the otherworldly character of the Camino grew increasingly evident. Even when the physical trail was obstructed by troop movements, obliterated by bombs, or made impassable due to hostilities, the spectral pilgrims pressed on with their endless voyage. They traversed war zones where no mortal could endure, forded rivers that had been rerouted or demolished, and took routes that survived solely in medieval maps. Soldiers of the Republic who tried to communicate with these apparitions noted encounters that contradicted their materialist worldview and reinforced the supernatural reality of the events. The beings would recognize the soldiers via hand signals and facial reactions. However, they could not understand modern language or answer queries posed in present-day Spanish. They appeared to inhabit a pocket of time that cut them off from the 20th century, yet permitted them to glimpse parts of the contemporary world. What unsettled observers most was the growing awareness that fresh apparitions kept merging into the unending march. Among the medieval pilgrims, soldiers who fell in the Civil War started to materialize, clad in their military attire yet holding the classic pilgrim staff and scallop shell. It appeared they were searching for the identical spiritual atonement that drove the medieval pilgrims. However, their contemporary gear marked them as glaring anachronisms in the realm of the supernatural. Captain Alvarez recorded with mounting anxiety the infusion of modern souls into the ghostly procession. Yesterday, Private Garcia was among the medieval pilgrims, he noted. Garcia perished 3 days prior at the Battle of Leon. He donned his Republican outfit, but clutched a pilgrim staff seemingly forged from medieval timber and iron. His stride mirrored the resolute intent of the old pilgrims, yet he gave no sign of hearing me when I shouted his name. The paranormal conscription of those lost in the Civil War sparked a dilemma that went beyond mere military issues. Should deceased combatants be merging with the spectral pilgrimage, it meant the Camino's spiritual import persisted, even as warfare shattered conventional religious observances. The path itself appeared to summon spirits that passed away in a state of spiritual emptiness, granting them a chance to pursue absolution via an everlasting journey. Yet the fact that these ghostly travelers could never finish their route implied that mere pilgrimage was not enough to achieve salvation. They lingered in a condition of spirit that permitted the search for redemption, but blocked its attainment. Their endless roaming acted as a supernatural critique on the confines of salvation through deeds and the crucial role of divine grace for any genuine spiritual change. How the Republican administration dealt with accounts of ghostly pilgrims highlighted the larger issue. Paranormal occurrences threatened their revolutionary worldview. State policy insisted that religious practices were merely superstitious leftovers from feudal tyranny. However, the proof of supernatural events along the Camino hinted that certain elements of Catholic tradition held truths beyond any political examination. These apparitions defied his materialist philosophy, compelling him to recognize the lasting sway of Spain's Catholic heritage even amidst revolutionary chaos. Just before dawn, I journeyed with them for close to an hour, penned Chanuda. They welcomed me without any hesitation, as though I were just another wayfarer in search of atonement along that age-old road. Their prayers echoed in tongues from across the ages, weaving a chorus that appeared to rise from the very bedrock of the Camino. When questioned about where they were heading, they gestured toward Santiago, yet described a town that had long vanished, a medieval hub for pilgrims, reshaped by centuries of political and religious shifts. The spectral pilgrim's tie to Spain's spiritual soul grew clearer as stories circulated across Republican territories. Troops from Catholic upbringings who had adopted atheist revolution started having dreams summoning them to the eternal walk. A number abandoned their military posts to tread the Camino, vanishing into the paranormal cavalcade and never resuming their worldly duties. The otherworldly summons of the ghostly pilgrimage overrode all political loyalties. Among the nationalist troops supporting Franco's Catholic Spain, there were also reports of encountering the eternal pilgrims, however. Their accounts were markedly different from what the Republican soldiers had described. Whereas the Republican forces viewed the ghostly pilgrims as proof of the lasting influence of Catholic customs, the nationalist soldiers saw in them a supernatural endorsement of their mission to bring back a Catholic Spain. In his letters to the Vatican, Father Gonzalez recorded the intricate theological aspects of the phantom pilgrimage. These spirits embody both the majesty and the sorrow of medieval Catholicism, he stated. The commitment of these souls to St. James illustrates how pilgrimage can ignite spiritual fervor. Yet their endless journey highlights the peril of trying to earn salvation by deeds alone, instead of through divine grace. These ghostly figures act as a otherworldly caution that true faith demands more than outward rituals. It calls for inner change. Even after the Spanish Civil War ended in 1939, the phantom pilgrim sightings persisted, though their character shifted. Under Franco's national Catholic government, the Way of Street, James was revived as an emblem of Spanish Catholic heritage. Yet the wandering specters kept defying the Church's sanctioned views on pilgrimage and atonement. Contemporary travelers on the Camino often recount meeting individuals wearing medieval clothing, particularly in the early morning darkness when the old trail appears to exist in a time warp linking yesterday and today. Such present-day observers share encounters that affirm the otherworldly essence of these occurrences, while also shedding light on what pilgrimage means spiritually in today's era. These ghostly wanderers of Santiago serve as a reminder that certain spiritual quests go beyond death, persisting as supernatural entities that force us to rethink salvation, belief, and the connection between worldly piety and everlasting deliverance. Their endless journey functions as both an inspiration and a caution, highlighting the strength of spiritual pursuit while cautioning that true redemption is not achievable merely through human deeds. Tale 4. The Library of the Heretic, the volumes that defied the flames. During the harsh winter of 1559, when Grand Inquisitor Fernando de Valdez ruled the Spanish Inquisition with an iron grip, Don Álvaro de Luna's library in historic Salamanca turned into a hub of paranormal activity that questioned all the Church's assumptions about the links between learning, belief, and God's truth. It wasn't a typical cache of banned books. It was a vault of knowledge that had escaped the auto-da-fé's fires by supernatural methods, becoming more powerful every time another volume was sentenced to be burned, and drawing in scholars whose appetite for learning overcame both worldly prudence and religious dread. Imagine the Casa de Luna, a Renaissance manor situated in the shadow of Salamanca's old cathedral, standing as a testament to the perilous crossroads of scholarship and heresy. Behind its Gothic spires and classical fronts lay hidden rooms filled with volumes that, according to official records, were never there. Books that the Inquisition had condemned, yet declined to stay obliterated. Manuscripts that regenerated from cinders, and others that materialized overnight, containing wisdom no living writer could have produced. As a descendant of the famous constable who once served King Juan II of Castile, Don Álvaro de Luna received far more than just aristocratic lineage and political ties. He became the guardian of an otherworldly library that selected its own holdings, drew in its own readers, and safeguarded itself using methods beyond human comprehension and church power. This library dwelled in a liminal space, acting as a haven for prohibited learning, even as it functioned right under the watchful eyes of the Inquisition's most ardent persecutors. The collection's otherworldly character revealed itself through occurrences that defied ordinary notions of books, wisdom, and how written language relates to divine reality. Books that had been set aflame in public autos de fe would show up again on the library shelves, frequently carrying the burn scars from their earlier destruction, yet perfectly whole and legible. These revived volumes appeared to be aware of their own persecution, including fresh chapters recounting their incineration and the spiritual repercussions of annihilating knowledge. Dr. Francisco Sanchez, a philosopher nicknamed the Skeptic, covertly examined the Luna collection while at the University of Salamanca. He recorded experiences that tested his methodical disbelief and at the same time affirmed the paranormal essence of the library's holdings. Within the Portuguese National Library's archives, his coded notes detailed literary phenomena, suggesting that books themselves had forms of awareness beyond their material forms. "I have seen books that write themselves," Sanchez recorded. Manuscripts materializing from nowhere, holding information that no living academic could have gathered. Volumes that respond to queries by showing appropriate sections, even if those sections were absent in earlier examinations. What truly unsettles are writings that appear to foresee the spiritual requirements of the reader, providing precisely the wisdom necessary to settle inner struggles regarding belief, logic, and the pursuit of truth. This paranormal archive drew academics from across Europe, all in search of insights unavailable in officially sanctioned works. Among these guests were not only covert Jews and Muslims aiming to maintain their religious practices, but also Catholic thinkers who understood that genuine belief demanded confronting difficult issues instead of unquestioningly accepting church rule. The first indications of otherworldly happenings came through dreams. Researchers who went to the library with authentic scholarly interest would encounter intense visions. These dreams gave exact roots to the Casa de Luna, thorough understanding of the archive's holdings, and foresight into the spiritual importance of their work. Such dreams had an uncanny uniformity, implying that the library itself summoned people whose scholarly commitment went beyond typical religious divides. "Books summon those who search for truth," Don Alvaro told guests, inquiring about the library's paranormal fame. "Books summon those who seek." Yet it was his delivery utterly convinced, not merely figurative language that caused scholars to understand they faced something extraordinary. This contradicted basic beliefs regarding what knowledge truly is. It also questioned the link between the written word and metaphysical truth. The otherworldly safeguard of the library surpassed merely keeping prohibited writings. The Casa de Luna appeared to dwell in a time-bound condition that enabled it to obtain books before their creation and convert documents into tongues their authors never knew. It granted entry to wisdom erased by historical ruin, and academics who read there described discovering texts. Those texts held details of things yet to happen. These works also included scientific breakthroughs that wouldn't happen for hundreds of years, and theological understandings that foresaw spiritual movements still to come. Friar Luis de Leon, an Augustinian monk, clandestinely accessed the Luna holdings while incarcerated by the Inquisition. He acknowledged the spiritual importance of the paranormal archive and grasped that prohibited wisdom was safeguarded by otherworldly methods as a form of divine guidance that went beyond church control. It further contested the church's assertion of being the exclusive intermediary between God and human comprehension. "God safeguards truth through channels the church cannot govern," he stated in his personal letters. This archive stands as evidence that heavenly knowledge functions by rules that surpass human organizations. The volumes that will not ignite symbolize not heretical defiance but a spiritual struggle against the perversion of wisdom by political powers. The paranormal occurrences grew stronger as the Inquisition's crackdown on intellectual liberty hit its highest point. The collection started producing writings that held proof of the Inquisition's atrocities, records of torture meetings, and statements from sufferers, exposing the divide between formal religious talk and true spiritual truth. Those papers seemed composed by persons who had perished during questioning. This implied the library functioned as a storehouse not only for illicit information, but also for the words of individuals muted by oppression. The strongest proof of the archive's paranormal character emerged from writings that disputed the Inquisition's reading of Catholic teachings. These books, penned in flawless religious Latin yet holding positions that no current academic would risk printing, showed that genuine Catholic belief demanded liberty of thought, religious acceptance, and interaction with various spiritual paths. The theological arguments they advanced were both orthodox and revolutionary, proving that genuine Catholic scholarship could endorse positions deemed heretical by the Inquisition. Before dying as a martyr in Geneva, Dr. Miguel Servet, a physician and theologian who had examined the Luna collection, chronicled experiences that confirmed the library's supernatural essence while offering insights into the bond between knowledge and spiritual truth. His secret annotations, kept in manuscripts that outlasted his execution, described literary events implying that books themselves host souls capable of enduring physical ruin. "I have read my own future works in this library," Servet recorded. "Volumes bearing my name yet holding knowledge I have not yet uncovered, arguments I have not yet shaped, and insights I will not develop until years after this writing. The library exists beyond conventional time, acting as a storehouse for wisdom that surpasses the boundaries of individual human consciousness." The supernatural library's reach stretched past single scholars, molding the wider growth of Spanish intellectual culture. Notions that first surfaced in the Luna collection later reappeared in the outputs of Spain's foremost writers, thinkers, and religious figures, often in shapes hinting at direct supernatural transmission rather than typical academic impact. Functioning as a spiritual catalyst, the library hastened the evolution of Spanish thought, granting access to knowledge that persecution would have otherwise erased. The Inquisition carried out numerous probes of the Casa de Luna, yet their attempts were blocked by phenomena that undercut ordinary interrogation methods. Books seized during raids would turn up again on the library's shelves within days. Those who gave testimony about the collection's contents suddenly lost memory of what they had seen. Even more troubling, Inquisition officials trying to catalog the supernatural texts discovered themselves intellectually swayed by arguments that contradicted their core beliefs. Those arguments challenged their faith, their authority, and the essence of truth. The clash between the occult library and ecclesiastical power peaked during the Great Auto da Fe of 1559. In a public ritual meant to showcase the Church's dominance over forbidden wisdom, the Inquisition sought to annihilate the Luna collection. As the flames devoured the volumes, observers reported hearing the texts cry out with human voices. They set free the spirits of scholars who had died guarding the knowledge inside those pages. Yet the supernatural opposition to the obliteration of wisdom manifested with divine exactness. Simultaneously, as each book was burned, identical copies materialized in libraries across Europe, implying that the Luna collection had attained a spiritual immortality that transcended physical destruction. Don Álvaro de Luna's reaction to his library's devastation would shape his spiritual legacy and influence Spanish intellectual culture for centuries. Rather than yielding to the Inquisition's rule or escaping to more tolerant regions, he chose to accept the occult forces that had safeguarded his collection. On the night of the Auto da Fe, he performed a ceremony binding his soul to the library itself, thus guaranteeing that the knowledge within its volumes would keep aiding scholars despite ecclesiastical persecution. The change occurred with otherworldly accuracy. The Casa de Luna became a spiritual sanctuary where the pursuit of knowledge could continue even under official prohibition. Academics approaching with genuine intellectual curiosity would find the library fully restored, its books unharmed, and its holdings enriched with new acquisitions mirroring the latest developments in human understanding. However, the occult preservation of forbidden knowledge carried costs that defied conventional notions of intellectual freedom. Visitors to the restored library aged swiftly during their studies, as if contact with immortal knowledge accelerated time's flow. Some left with recollections of conversations with scholars who had died centuries earlier. Others developed insights that proved correct, but could not be published without risking charges of heresy. The supernatural library still shapes Spanish intellectual culture through phenomena that confirm its ongoing existence. Modern researchers studying Inquisition history report encountering texts containing information absent from official archives. They also note documents that appear overnight in research libraries and understandings emerging from dreams that prove accurate when cross-checked with independent sources. Local tradition in Salamanca holds that the Casa de Luna continues to serve as a refuge for scholars seeking knowledge that transcends political and religious boundaries. They act as links connecting the past with the present, bridging diverse religious beliefs and joining humanity's deep desire for truth with the sacred reality. That reality both unveils and hides itself within the obscurity of our most intense spiritual quest. The shadowy presence in Spanish Gothic horror isn't an absence of illumination, but rather the existence of stark realities too overwhelming for ordinary daylight. By welcoming these dim regions, we uncover not hopelessness, but optimism. The optimism lies in genuine spiritual search, overcoming oppression. It rests on the belief that holy truth endures despite human efforts to silence it, and that the journey toward the divine perseveres forever through every challenge. This marks the end of our journey through the eerie shadows that haunt Spain's Gothic soul. Until we cross paths once more in the domain of mystery and the inexplicable, I stay as your guide through the darkness that reveals far more than light ever could.